Insidious is a film that has just recently been released in cinemas, and I went to see it last night. And I had to think about it, and now I sort of wanted to make a video about it because it's a horror film that a lot of horror fans have been looking forward to. I think because it's directed by James Wan, who made the original Saw film, and there's been a little bit of buzz about the movie. The film is basically a haunted house film, I suppose, with a slight twist, but it is essentially a haunted house film. And the film follows a young family. You have the mother and father. They have two boys, I think, round about maybe 8 or 9, and maybe one of them slightly older. And then they have a baby, and they've just moved into this new house. And once they move into this new house, a whole bunch of creepy things start happening. As these creepy things start happening, one of their sons, for some unknown reason, seems to go into a catatonic state of which he won't come out, and months pass. All the doctors have looked at him, and they can't really find anything wrong with him, any reason why he's in that sort of state. So the mother, who starts seeing apparitions and ghosts, then goes to more unconventional sources in an attempt to bring her son out of this catatonic state. And when she does that, she brings a psychic and some paranormal investigators into the house, and they try to get to the bottom as to why this is happening. And the film is really about a family that are being torn apart by this entire situation. So, without any spoilers really, that's the setup to the film. Now, it may sound like a sort of run-of-the-mill haunted house flick, and in some ways it is, but Insidious, for me, had some really incredibly effective jump-out scares. It had some really great jump-out scares. In fact, there was one that caught myself and everyone else in the cinema completely off guard, and it involves a window, and I don't want to ruin it, but I turned into a small schoolgirl for about 5 seconds. But it was really effective, and there were a few really great jump out scares that were very well crafted. The entire film is well put together. It is really well put together, in fact, and I have to give it a lot of plaudits just for trying. I think it's a film that has tried to be scary, and in many ways it succeeds. However, there's a point in the film about 2/3 of the way in, when you get to the third act, and as with a lot of films, you either go with the big reveal, or you think that's ridiculous, that's really silly, and that's what happens in this film. You're either going to get 2/3 in and then feel like this is totally lost the plot, it's unravelled before your eyes, or you're going to sort of go, right, okay, I'll go with this and enjoy the rest of the film. My attitude to it was, I knew the film had went too far. I think it had lost. I think it lost a lot of people, a lot of the audience, when the reveal about what's actually going on happens, and it becomes a bit too overt, a bit too Hollywood. But I still went with it, and because of that I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was, and because I think the first half of the film at least had been so solid, I was able to forgive the film for any of its sort of Hollywood-esque shortcomings. Now, again, without trying to give too much away, one of the biggest problems that Insidious has is that it is really derivative. It essentially, to me, borrowed heavily from 4 films, 3 of which are pretty iconic, and the fourth is known in horror circles, and the director certainly is. So the first film, I think, that's the most obvious one straight off the bat when the film begins, is The Exorcist, where we're shown a title card when the credits come up saying Insidious, and we get, you know, this cacophony of violins and stringed instruments that just sounds straight out of the Exorcist score. Although it's a little bit more in your face, but you know, it's obvious that, you know, that's what they were drawn heavily for. I had a little wry smile when I saw it. There are also elements of possession in the film, which are you know, very familiar when obviously when you think of a film like The Exorcist. Also, there is the you know, a priest does turn up at one point, and there is a sort of pseudo exorcism, and all of which really reminds you of the original Exorcist film. I think also there's the for a large part of the film, it focuses on the mother and her struggle with what's happening to her child, and that is, you know, again reminiscent of The Exorcist. Even though the husband is there, he's very distant for the first part of the film, so you really feel like the mother is on her own. So yeah, so it's derivative of The Exorcist in that way. I'm sure other people will find other similarities, because there were some in there. You also have the lesser known film I was talking about is Mario Bava's Shock, or I think in some places it was known as Beyond the Door 2, which is a sort of haunted house film in itself, and it does revolve, you know, very closely around the relationship between a mother and her child. I think what the biggest similarities between the two films, the biggest similarity is just in the look. I think the way that the camera is used within this house environment is very similar to Shock, and I'd be very surprised if James Wan hadn't seen it and drawn some inspiration from it. I think there's a strange atmosphere which is very similar to Shock, almost this sort of stagnant sense of impending doom. The third film I would say is Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. In fact, we see, this is probably ruined something, we see something at some point that's very, very reminiscent of Freddy. You know, sharpening his nails, you know, his blades, you know, that sort of thing. It's very, very similar. It's shot very much like some of the scenes that we've seen in some of the Freddy Krueger films, where he's in the boiler room, and there's even the design of this thing that you see looks quite like Freddy Krueger, and that is the question of the safety of children, which is obviously prevalent in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Lastly, and the one that the film is, I mean, to me, my god, this film is just a remake of it, is Tobe Hooper's and Steven Spielberg's Poltergeist. This is a blatant remake of Poltergeist. It's what I would say, it's a mean-spirited remake. You see, what made Poltergeist great was that essentially it was a family drama as well, and there was a real heart to it, whereas I feel in a lot of ways, in a couple of scenes they tried to go for that, but for the most part the film doesn't have that sort of sentimentality in it. There are so many parallels between Insidious and Poltergeist, it's ridiculous. First of all, you have the idea of a child that has been taken into some sort of alternate state, just like in Poltergeist, by some malevolent force. You have the mother and father trying to deal with that. You have a psychic that then is called in, who explains in great detail as to what's happening, all the exposition, which is what happens in Poltergeist. There are paranormal investigators brought in that add a little bit of comic relief, again happens in Poltergeist. And just in general, I think, you know, it just feels like, you know, it feels like a remake. I mean, I'm surprised no one's actually said, well, wait a minute, this is a little bit too close to what Poltergeist was. You know, I mean, there are no real direct scenes that are lifted. The only thing I can think of is that there's near the beginning of Poltergeist, there's this sort of off the wall moment where all of a sudden the parents are smoking weed, and although it's not shocking, it's kind of like, it's just a strange thing to have in the film, and you sort of like, you know, what's going on when you see that in Poltergeist. And in Insidious, there's a sort of strange moment where the father is like, you know, sort of, he's obsessing over his appearance, the fact of getting older. He's putting in like eye cream and all this, and it's a little bit like that. It's a little bit of a sort of off the wall moment. But yeah, so I think that Insidious and Poltergeist are very, very, very closely related, and this does seem in many ways to be a sort of unofficial remake. All that being said, I think Insidious is a really effective horror film. It tries to get you in a lot of cheap ways. It's jump out scares with loud noises, you know, and some people really frown on that and think that that's a really lowbrow way to create horror, because it's very easy to make any audience jump when you have, like, you know, a loud noise and something, you know, jumps out at you. But I would say that the jump out scares in this are really, really well done. There's a couple in there that are brilliant, and I think will stay with me. So that's really what I think of the movie. I think it's definitely worth a watch, and you know, there aren't many horror films in the last 20 years where I was impressed, and there were aspects of Insidious that I was impressed by, and you know, I will go and get the DVD when it comes out. And as much as I think it is really derivative, as much as I think it probably copies Poltergeist a little bit too much, I think James Wan has shown in this film that, you know, he is a talented director. And I think if you can get James Wan to put a little bit more of the sort of slow burning horror in between the jump out scares, I think, you know, you could make another really great haunted house film, because I think absolutely this film will have a sequel. I think it is the start of a franchise. I don't know what the box office return has been on it, but you know, I suspect that it will be the start of a franchise. I'd definitely go and check it. I was pleasantly surprised by it, and also, if you haven't seen any of the 4 films that I mentioned that this film lies on top of, I don't know what I'm talking about. The 4 films that it sort of draws from heavily: The Exorcist, Mario Bava's Shock, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Poltergeist. Definitely check them out, because they're all classics. And that's all. So Insidious is a thumbs up. I don't know, I'm turning to Roger Ebert now. Bye.